Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by John R. DiJulius III and David D. Murray, President and Vice President of Consulting, respectively, at the DiJulius Group, and co-authors of the book, The Employee Experience Revolution. This week, our conversation is about the push for debt-free degrees for employees, Uber's latest commitment to accessibility, and retailers' embrace of Diwali. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you today? Tell us
Great,
a little bit
Bernadette.
about yourselves.
Thank you. We're both from Cleveland, Ohio. Little sting from our Guardians losing to the Yankees, I think Saturday night. Got knocked out. But Dave used to work for the Cleveland Indians at the time.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the show. I would love to tell folks a little bit about your book.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, the employee experience revolution is really written about where organizations can be better when it comes to creating an experience internally for their team members. And we look at everything from the hiring process, where you find people that you're going to interview, the actual interview process, onboarding, but then really what's going to happen once they become part of your culture. How are you really focusing on creating the culture that you want to have? I always like to say that your culture is going to happen whether you focus on it or not. And it's either going to be what you want it to be or it's not going to be what you want it to be, but it's going to happen. And so organizations really need to focus on that. And then how do you train your leaders to really lead within that culture that you're trying to create and get away from what we call the manager roulette? Because we've all been there. We've all had a job where we loved our manager. We couldn't wait to get to work every day. We've also had a job where we didn't like our manager and work was a drag and we didn't want to go in every day. And those two have more to do with it, right? If I like my manager or don't like my manager, those two are more involved than we sometimes think and organizations think. So it's pretty important for them to be focused on how their managers and their directors are leading.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know your background previously, I know part of your background is in the customer experience. And I think it matters so much to have employees have a great experience so that they can then give a great customer experience. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship there?
Yeah, what it gets experience on the inside will get experience on the outside, right? And it's critical. No, none of us, most of us can't avoid working in our lifetime, and I really don't think we have a personal and professional life. And so much of our time is spent at work, and if we hate the job, and my first job, out of college, I was working for UPS, great company, but I got paid extremely well for myself at the time. But every day I drove to work and said, in 29 more years, 3 months and 2 days, I could retire. And I wanted to get old as fast as I could. And that's no way to live a life. So I think it's just really important that we have one life to live. And as far as companies and leaders, we should make it a life of meaning and purpose and good pay and all those things that come with it. And then
Yeah.
the customer just gets taken care of.
Yep. I agree. I think you're right. Purpose is giving your employees a sense of purpose is really critical. And we know that the demographics tell us that Gen Z in particular and younger generations are incredibly diverse. So we have to think about inclusion as we build leadership competencies.
Well, Bernadette, one thing that we talk about in our book that ties into that, we uncovered a statistic that came out at the end of 2023 that states that currently 82% of managers across corporate America are what's termed as accidental managers, which means they were promoted because they did their job well, but they don't necessarily have the managerial skills, the training to actually lead their teams. And so if listeners right now thought about it, they can probably identify some of those leaders in their own organization pretty quickly. And so to your point, you're absolutely correct. Not only do organizations have to focus on training their leaders how they want them to lead within this culture they're trying to build, but those skills like DEI and other things that they don't get in school, that they might not have had previous training about, are so important right now. But they're not always out there as a resource.
Absolutely. Well, in this week's 5 Things newsletter, I shared a story about how I recently had my butt kicked on the pickleball court because I showed up to play. I was having a good time, and I was playing. Ended up starting a game with someone that I'd never played before, and my initial assumption about that person was, "Oh, I'm going to kick some butt here." And guess what? I had my butt kicked, right? So I made a mistaken assumption again, and I do it all the time. And I think it's because in the heat of the moment, we're really hardwired to be judgmental. And it really takes conscious inclusion to be otherwise. And judgmental can mean in lots of things. We're just dismissive of someone else. We're not necessarily thinking about what their needs might be. And so I think that it's really important to talk about mistakes and talk about these little mistaken assumptions and give employees a perspective that leaders don't always have it all together either.
That's such a good point. And I've done that in so many ways, in so every area of my life, and you judge a person. It could be their zip code. It could be the area code. It could be that they're not a central casting, right? And so our first business is salons and spas. And you have your mindset of who you want to work for you, this 25-year-old attractive, fashionable, all those things. And then when you get a candidate that applies that doesn't fit that mold, you can kind of say, oh, this isn't a right fit. And, and even in the DiJulius Group, our consulting business, I had one, and she knows, Nicole, that we hired about, Dave, she was a year or two before you. So 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah, she's probably 13. Yeah.
And when they told me they were thinking about hiring her, I judged her. By her looks, by her background. She'd only worked in like fast food. And I'm like, we're a high-end consulting, company. And I just immediately like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I don't think I said those things, but years later I said, she's been our best employee for over a decade. She's a rock star. Like literally, if you look up, the dictionary of world class, I mean, if you talk to her, she'd blow your mind about just, she'd remember everything. She'd send you something on pickleball. Like she just would remember things like that. And so it's so often, but even clients, we might be judgmental. We might see, oh, she can't afford, I'm not going to recommend, what's best for her because she can't afford this. And that's, so wrong. And so 100 years ago that we still get caught up in that.
Yeah. I mean, we miss out on so much by these mistaken assumptions, right? And so I just want to talk about it more because I think it brings our humanity into play. And I think leaders ought to as well.
It's humbling. It's very humbling. And you think about how many great opportunities you lost because you allowed the broad stroking, stereotyping to enter in your mind, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, well, let's move into this week's good vibes. The first story this week is from the new Star Wars book, Secrets of the Clone Troopers, which introduces Sister, a new transgender clone trooper. Now, the story, from fearing rejection to fighting acceptance from fellow soldiers, illustrates authentic diversity. Now, there was a little bit of backlash, but I appreciate that Star Wars is leaning in and is representing folks in an accurate way.
Yeah. That's a great story. My wife and I were just able to be at Disneyland about 3 weeks ago. I had to go out there for a speaking engagement. We got to stay a couple of days and we walked around Disneyland and spent some time in Star Wars. My wife went out and we got some matching Star Wars shirts and we were walking around. And Disney does such a great job of inclusion with their guests already, right? They do that. Like their characters are out there. They're looking for everybody. It was such an inclusive environment. Granted, we were in California, and California might be a little ahead in some cases when it comes to it comes to that. But it was such an inclusive environment. So I'm thrilled to hear that they're taking that even steps further.
Exactly, exactly. And these things matter. They really do matter, and they help people feel more represented. Okay, the second story this week comes from Uber, which is enhancing its app with features to better serve riders with disabilities. So, riders can now self identify as deaf, hard of hearing, or visually impaired and choose communication preferences like chat only. And Uber is actually piloting a feature to notify drivers when a service animal will be present and training video for drivers on handling service animals. So, they're really being very thoughtful about this.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that, and I think, whether it's generational or anything, we have to make sure that we're meeting our customers where they want to be met, and that could be that, I like I could be a younger, person. I like self service. I don't want to call and versus someone who really wants to, what we say is, get something off their chest and speak to someone. So I love all those different things. I even like that Uber, gives you the option of, do you want to talk or do you not want to talk?
Hmm.
Right. I may be having a bad day and I just want to close my eyes. I don't want to be asked, anything, or vice versa. I've had a great day and I kind of chatty because I want you to ask me about my day so I can tell you all my victories. Right.
Right. Yeah,
Love that.
Well,
exactly.
one other thing on this, Bernadette, that I love, I've been in some Ubers. I'm an Uber often. John is too. We travel a lot for work, as do you. And I've been in some Ubers where the driver was deaf. And what I
Mm,
like about this is back then, and this was a few years ago now, I had no indication of that, right? There was no communication to me that my driver was hard of hearing. And so I got in the car, and I remember one instance where he actually had put up some signs. So it fell upon him to let me know that we weren't going to be able to communicate traditionally. So I love this too, because I think it also opens up that world for their drivers to have that communication in advance. It doesn't fall on them to have that, share of information.
mhm.
So putting that in the app, I think helps drivers immensely too.
Yeah, I think it's better to be proactive, right, rather than reactive here. And again, like you said, people don't have to then come out as whatever disability they have,
Right.
which can be vulnerable. Okay, the third story is about the new representation index created by Female Quotient and XR Extreme Reach. This index uses artificial intelligence to assess ads based on their age, body type, gender expression, skin tone, and more. So these scores help brands, including Procter and Gamble, identify gaps in representation before the campaigns launch. So when 85% of purchase decisions are made by women and other underrepresented groups, this can really matter.
Yeah, I mean, good and bad, right? It goes back to what we talked about earlier, and we just have to be careful with, broad stroking a certain group, and alienating others and making our business model, not friendly to all types.
The thing I love about this too is I feel that organizations, prior to a tool like this, even with the best intentions, they were still kind of guessing, right?
Mhm.
They really weren't sure, and they were hoping for the best. They were hoping they were including all of their potential customers, and maybe they weren't. So I think this direction is really, really helpful for organizations.
Yeah, especially because, in an ideal scenario, there are diverse people represented on the creative team to
Sure.
minimize the gaps, right, in what gets produced. But hey, there's artificial intelligence now. So
Right.
I love it. Okay, the next story comes from Medtronic, which has a benefit for employees where they are upfront, like paying college tuition upfront with $7.7 million set aside for this. So the idea is that traditional tuition reimbursements or benefits require reimbursement. So employees have to pay for their education up front and then get reimbursed, which can be a big barrier for especially entry level and lower income folks. Medtronics gives folks money up front for this, and it's helped a lot of folks. I think they have over 700 employees who've benefited from this already.
This is incredible. Medtronics has always been a leader in how they take care of their employees. But I was just listening to a podcast today, and they were talking about, if you the one, you know, magic bullet to reduce depression, increase health, all they listed like 10, 15 things. You're like, come on, is college degrees, right?
Ooh,
And when you make
wow.
it easier for your employees to be on a level playing field, and now, I'm more likely to get promoted or have the opportunity to get promoted. Maybe before, if I had to pay for this up front, I was going to go slower and take less classes, because I couldn't, it take forever. And the likelihood of me not finishing is higher than if I can be more aggressive and go at the pace that I'm willing to go. If that financial barrier, I love that. I love so much about Medtronics.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is a great, great story. And I think that it just it especially helps folks from, traditionally marginalized backgrounds. So it's great. Okay, and the last story this week is about Diwali, what? Let's try that again. Diwali, the Indian Festival of Lights, is coming up, and retailers are ready. With 5.4 million South Asians here in the US, retailers like Walmart, Target, and Costco are offering festive products that resonate with South Asians and beyond. And there's even a new Diwali Barbie and Diwali themed decor and gifts. So this is like a big, big thing. This is like the first Diwali Barbie that's actually accurate. There have been a few others where skin tones weren't right, like things were misaligned, but there's a really great inclusive push here now.
Yeah, that is great. And we know how important that is, right? We hear the stories, especially from young girls that were able to identify with a Barbie for the first time when they were younger. We've heard the evidence of how important that is. So I think it's really, really important for people to see themselves represented, even walking through a Target, walking through a Walmart. That's important and it's impactful.
It's
It
also learning
absolutely.
about other people's cultures, right?
Mhm.
In such a good way. And sometimes you only get that in your real life is maybe watching a movie, right?
Mhm.
Like you've been exposed to other cultures, in a movie. And so, Cinco de Mayo, right? Having days that we can appreciate and theme and learn about other people's cultures and the great things about it.
I mean, who doesn't like to celebrate? Who doesn't like
Right.
to have fun and find joy? I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
We have
And
St. Patrick's Day, and we have the Feast of the Assumption, and which I don't know if it's everywhere, but in our little Italy in Cleveland, it's a huge deal. Obviously,
mhm,
St. Patrick's Day in Chicago is a
mhm,
huge deal, but you get to learn and celebrate whether you're Irish or you're not.
mhm.
Everyone's Irish on St. Patrick's Day, so I love that.
Absolutely, and it just brings us together. It offers opportunity for conversation, it offers opportunity for more joy, and, that Diwali Barbie sold out within 24 hours, so people
Wow.
are very excited about this. All
That's
right. Well, it has been a real treat having you on the show today. One of the features of the show is called Good Vibes to Go, and I'll share mine and I'll have you share yours. So, my good vibe to go is that it's almost Halloween, a time cultural appropriation can go very badly. So, I'm going to share an article about tips for an inclusive Halloween. I'll put that in the show notes. All right. What is your good vibe to go?
So
I'll
mine.
go.
Oh,
So
go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry, John. I'll go. Mine actually came from you, Bernadette. Mine came from your newsletter. There's a segment of your story about getting your butt kicked that really stood out to me that I think is so important, especially since we were talking about our new book a little bit earlier, the internal experience, right? The employee experience revolution. And that's when you said that humility is an underutilized skill. And yes, it is a skill. So as we talked earlier about training our leaders on how to lead, using that humility and being mindful of that is so important because it helps us stop some of those other things that we know we get in trouble with, such as falling prey to our judgments, etc. So
Mhm.
I thought that was a great call out.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Folks, how Dave, John, how can folks get in touch with you?
TheDiJuliusGroup.com, TheDiJulius Group.com, or John at TheDiJuliusGroup.com, or Dave at TheDiJuliusGroup.com.
Awesome. Well, it has been a treat. Thank you so much for being here today. Congratulations on the new book. And I hope that you have a great week. Everyone have a great week. Take care. If you
Thanks,
don't already
Dave.
get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com.